The true nature of forgiveness, a selfish act of surrender. Mankind has never been bestowed with the authority or power to forgive sin. Only God can forgive. Telling someone, I forgive you, may give the wrongdoer a sense of peace or psychological absolution from the victim, but it does not erase their debt with God. They must still answer for that debt on Judgment Day, or ask God for forgiveness. Forgiveness as self-preservation. Because you lack the authority to absolve others, saying I forgive you is ultimately a selfish act, and a necessary one. It is the moment you choose to surrender, give up the fight, and ensure the act no longer holds any power over your life. Forgiving the act, not the person. True human forgiveness focuses on the act of the behavior, not the individual. You acknowledge the wrong, analyze it, make peace with it, and you move on. You consume it into your life and understand that it is now part of your life. To transition from a victim to a state of peace, you must undergo a practical cleanup exercise. You process the initial shock of victimization, the ensuing confusion, and the anger. And eventually, you reach acceptance, realizing the consequences are now manageable or bearable. True letting go requires you to face the wrong, acknowledge the injustice, and put necessary protection measures in place to ensure that it never happens to you again. You make a conscious decision to stop being the victim. You release the person, the act, the anger, and the injustice into the past. Look inward and examine if any part of your behavior invited the response. If you genuinely find fault, own up to it and forgive yourself. The trap of false guilt is that you must only forgive yourself for things that you know to be factually true. Do not take responsibility for things outside of your control. You do not exist in a vacuum. On this planet, everyone's individual destinies are constantly colliding, clashing, and occasionally harmonizing in a state of flux. Because you cannot control this cosmic traffic, you must stop blaming yourself and stop blaming others for events that were completely outside of human control. While human forgiveness is about cleaning up your own inner world, spiritual forgiveness requires a deep, active confrontation with the divine. To truly lay your burdens down, you must confront what you did and the consequences it has on your life and spirit, how it offended God, and what He truly desires for your life, how a refusal to forgive yourself actively damages your life. And through this confrontation, underpinned by God's grace, you ask for divine forgiveness, receive it, and commit to sin no more. Historically, human society had no concept of grace or restoration. In the old days, in the old law, humanity was trapped by rigid priestly teachings and rituals. Breaking a rule meant being abandoned to the wolves by faith leaders. There was no mechanism to wash away the stain of sin. Offenders faced total exile, crucifixion, stoning, or mockery outside of the city walls. Jesus entered this rigid system as a perfect, far reaching gift. He shifted the paradigm by instantly discerning people's internal pain and community circumstances. He healed only those who sincerely asked, reading their hearts and tying physical healing directly to spiritual forgiveness with the command to sin no more. This redefined the ultimate standard of grace. Forgive them, for they do not know what they do. To successfully navigate this cleanup exercise and reach a state of letting go, your journey must be underpinned by God's grace and requires these 11 essential traits: recognition, acknowledgement, which is facing the reality of the wrong, empathy and understanding, discerning the chaos of colliding destinies, wisdom and compassion, a lack of fear, the courage to confront and to set protection measures in place, determination and discipline, staying committed to letting go, fairness and good judgment. Discerning what was actually in your control versus what wasn't. And the very last thing, obviously, is love. We are now going to do the deep dive. Please enjoy.
So imagine holding the keys to your betrayer's prison cell, right?
Okay.
You're standing there, ready to let them out, only to realize those keys, they were never meant for their door. They actually only fit your own handcuffs.
Oh, wow. That's a heavy image.
Right, because today we are completely dismantling everything you think you know about forgiveness.
We really are. And we're looking at a pretty intense stack of sources today to do this.
Yeah, tell us what we're working with.
So we have this collection of really raw, handwritten notes that detailed, the visceral experience of betrayal.
Like step-by-step emotional processing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And alongside those notes, we have this deeply provocative essay. It's titled The Divine Debt and the Architecture of Self-Forgiveness.
Such a great title.
It is. And the core argument running through all these documents is that our modern understanding of forgiveness is, well, it's fundamentally flawed and perhaps even psychologically harmful.
Which is wild to think about. But really quick, before we jump in, just a quick note to you listening.
Yeah, good call.
These sources rely pretty heavily on Judeo-Christian theology, right? So specifically concepts of God, sin, and the historical figure of Jesus to make their philosophical points.
Right.
And we just want to be clear that we aren't endorsing any specific religious viewpoints today.
No, not at all. We're just impartially exploring this fascinating psychological framework that the author builds around those concepts.
Exactly. Our mission here is to explore a total paradigm shift. Because, we are taught from a very young age that forgiving those who wrong us is like our ultimate moral duty.
Yeah, it's the gold standard of being a good person.
Right. But the essay argues that you don't even possess the jurisdiction to forgive someone else. The power to wipe a slate clean is just a complete illusion.
It's a huge claim. And to truly grasp the weight of this argument, the sources actually demand that we step back first.
Like, historically.
Yeah, historically. We have to examine the ancient context of crime and punishment. We have to look at a society where the very concept of interpersonal forgiveness literally did not exist.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I think we take for granted how we handle mistakes today.
We definitely do. The first set of handwritten notes paints this deeply claustrophobic picture of ancient communities. And they were operating with absolutely zero margin for error.
Zero margin.
Zero. The text explicitly talks about the inability to ignore the stem of sin, as they call it.
Because if you consider the sociology of an ancient tribe, a zero-tolerance policy wasn't just about them being cruel. It was a mechanism for pure survival.
Right. If someone committed a wrong, you couldn't afford to have a liability in the camp. A mistake wasn't a learning opportunity. It was a literal threat to the entire community's existence.
So how did the leadership handle that?
Well, the author details how incredibly rigid the priestly teachings and rituals were. And they were designed that way specifically to maintain absolute order.
So no second chances.
None. If you broke a rule, you could not simply be forgiven for your, previous trespasses and welcomed back by the faith leaders. The consequences listed in the notes are permanent and terminal. If you messed up, you were ostracized, stoned, hung, crucified, tortured, mocked.
Wait. We're cast beyond the city walls, right?
Yes, cast outside the city.
And I think we need to clarify that being left beyond the city walls in the ancient world wasn't like a timeout.
No, not at all.
It was a death sentence. By starvation or predators or whatever else was out there. You were permanently severed from your community.
Exactly. It was final. So if this zero tolerance policy meant certain death, introducing any concept of grace wouldn't just be a minor moral shift.
Right. It would completely upend their entire justice system.
It would upend their whole reality. And the sources introduce this massive historical disruptor into that exact dynamic.
The disruptor being Jesus.
Yes. The notes describe the arrival of the Son, referring to the historical figure of Jesus who enters this really rigid landscape. And he's communicating with humans who the text describes as lost and foolish.
Trapped in their own minds by these completely unforgiving laws.
Right. And this disruptor fundamentally changed the social math.
How so?
Well, before this, the dominant philosophy was an eye for an eye. It's pure math. If the equation demands your life for a mistake, that's what the community takes.
Yeah. Very black and white.
But the author argues that Jesus reached a level of perfection that allowed him to introduce a lifeline into that system. He brought in a new paradigm where a person wasn't permanently, fatally defined by their worst act.
Okay, so the debt of sin still existed, obviously.
Yes, the debt was still there. But the immediate physical execution of the sinner was no longer the only acceptable outcome.
And that shift right there, from immediate physical destruction to this longer, more complex spiritual ledger, that brings us perfectly into the present day.
It really does.
Because once society moves away from instantly throwing people outside the city walls to die, we are left with the messy reality of having to actually live alongside people who have wronged us.
Yeah, the awkward Tuesday after a betrayal.
Exactly. And the handwritten notes transitioned from this grand historical overview into a deeply personal breakdown of that emotional anatomy, the anatomy of being wronged.
Right. The author synthesizes what they call the ingredients of forgiveness, and this is based on their own lived experience.
Which makes it feel very grounded.
It does, and they don't start with grace or high-minded understanding. The sequence actually starts with raw shock.
Just the impact of the event.
Exactly. The very first ingredient is feeling victimized. It's that moment your ego shatters under the realization that the social contract has been broken.
Leaving you with that echoing question. How could this be done to me?
Yes. And that visceral shock inevitably gives way to confusion as you try to force some kind of logical explanation onto a senseless act.
Which we all do. We want it to make sense.
But it usually doesn't. So the notes map out how that confusion progresses into anger directed at the person, and finally into acceptance of what happened.
I really want to linger on this progression for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think we often conflate the psychological stage of acceptance with the theological concept of forgiveness. And they are not the same thing at all.
No, they're vastly different.
To you listening right now, have you ever found yourself trapped in that exhausting loop of anger, where you're wondering why you can't just flip a switch and forgive someone, even after you've totally accepted that the event happened?
Oh, that's such a common place to get stuck.
Mm.
And it raises an important question about how we define the finish line of trauma.
Right. Like, when is it actually over?
Well, the text points out that acceptance simply means acknowledging the reality of the consequences. That's it.
Just saying, yes, this happened.
Exactly. And once you accept those consequences, you reach a critical decision point. Do you continue to interact with this person, or do you cut them out of your life?
And in our modern culture, we tend to label that final decision as forgiveness. We just assume that if we choose to move forward and keep them in our lives, we are washing their slate clean.
Right. But just as we think we have that emotional roadmap figured out, the essay The Divine Debt introduces a concept that just completely pulls the rug out from under us.
This is my favorite part of the deep dive.
It's so intense. The central thesis of the essay is unequivocal. At the very heart of forgiveness is the understanding that you cannot actually give it to anyone.
Wait, you can't do it.
You do not possess the power.
That completely shatters the paradigm we're exploring today.
It really does. The text argues that you have no authority and you were never appointed as the one who grants absolution.
Because that is exclusively the jurisdiction of God. Or, if we strip away the theology, the universe's cosmic ledger.
Exactly. Only God can forgive sin.
So when you look someone in the eye and say, I forgive you,
Sure.
what are you actually doing then?
Well, the essay argues you are doing something entirely different than what you think.
Okay, like what?
You might be giving the wrongdoer a temporary sense of peace, sure. You might be offering them a release from your personal vengeance.
Like, I'm not going to key your car.
Right, exactly. It might even soothe your own immediate anxiety. But it does not mean their debt is cleared.
Wow.
The author insists that the wrongdoer still carries that debt. They must pay it on judgment, or they must reconcile it with God. You, the human victim, are merely a bystander to their cosmic debt.
That is so heavy. And the essay takes this a step further, framing the physical act of saying, I forgive you, as a selfish act, doesn't it?
It does. The author claims it is a selfish decision to ensure you finally surrender, give up the fight, and choose to no longer be the victim.
So you forgive the act, but you cannot forgive the person.
That's the distinction they make, yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because pushing back on this, calling forgiveness a selfish act, initially sounds incredibly cynical.
It does sound harsh.
It seems to strip away the moral beauty and altruism we are taught to strive for, right? Isn't it just reducing it to an emotional survival tactic?
What's fascinating here is how the text reclaims that word selfish.
Okay, how so?
In the architecture of this essay, this brand of selfishness is vital self-preservation. It is the cauterization of a wound.
I see.
When you hold on to anger, waiting for the authority to forgive the person, you are chaining your emotional state to their past action. You are allowing their behavior to dictate your present reality.
So by calling it selfish, the author is actually giving you permission to prioritize your own peace.
Exactly.
Permission to drop the illusion that you are their judge and jury.
You consume the event into your worldview, you put protective measures in place so you aren't victimized the same way again, and you let go of the anger.
It's entirely about neutralizing the threat in your own life, rather than absolving them of their guilt.
The text makes this crucial distinction. The act wronged you. You learn to make the act bearable, but you do not have the power to forgive the sin.
Because that power was never bestowed on mankind.
Right, you are simply dropping your end of the rope.
So if we aren't granting cosmic forgiveness, what is the actual psychological work happening here? If it's not forgiveness in the traditional sense, what is the process of dropping that rope?
We're healing. We're healing ourselves while navigating a really chaotic world of colliding paths.
And the sources give us a roadmap for this, right?
They do. The second image in our sources outlines a massive toolkit required for this healing process.
It's quite a list.
It is. It includes recognition, empathy, understanding, wisdom, compassion, lack of fear, determination, discipline, fairness, good judgment, and love.
All underpinned by grace.
Yes.
Instead of just listing those out, though, let's look at the actual mechanisms behind a few of them, because this is where the real work happens.
Let's do it.
Take discipline, for example. Why is discipline required to let go of a betrayal?
Because anger is deeply comfortable.
Oh, it really is. It feels good.
Right. Anger feels like armor. The text suggests that discipline is required to actively stop yourself from falling back into the seductive comfort of righteous indignation.
You have to literally train your mind to stay in a state of acceptance.
Exactly. Even when your ego desperately wants to drag you back into feeling victimized.
And what about lack of fear? That seems like an odd tool for processing betrayal.
It does at first. But it requires a lack of fear to accept that you live in a world where people will hurt you and you cannot control them.
Wow. Right.
Holding a grudge is basically a fear-based response. It's a way of trying to maintain control over a person who hurt you.
Like if I stay mad at you, I still have a tether to you.
Exactly. Letting go requires the bravery to be vulnerable again, knowing full well the world is unpredictable.
The sources draw a sharp distinction here by looking at how the historical Jesus operated, right? Because if he wasn't just handing out blanket forgiveness, what was he actually doing?
The text points out that Jesus operated as a healer, not merely a judge.
Okay.
He instantly recognized what made people sick, evaluating their pain and the circumstances. But the key mechanism the author highlights is that he would heal them only when they asked.
Only when they asked.
Yes, and only when he saw in their hearts a genuine desire for healing.
So when he famously said, "Sin no more," what did that mean in this context?
The text argues this was a prescriptive act of healing the root cause of their behavior. It wasn't just wiping a ledger clean and saying, "You're good to go."
And what about the phrase on the cross, "Forgive them, for they do not know what they do"?
Even that is framed by the author as an acknowledgement of a sickness. It's a recognition of a profound lack of understanding in his executioners, rather than a cosmic pardon of the act itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And this brings us to the underlying reality that makes this whole healing process so demanding today.
Right, the concept of colliding destinies.
I love this concept.
It's brilliant. The author writes that human beings do not exist in a vacuum. Everyone's destinies are constantly in a state of flux within the same shared space.
Sometimes these paths harmonize, but very often they clash.
And this constant collision is entirely out of our control.
Think of it like a massive multi-lane traffic intersection, right?
Yeah.
But the stoplights have completely failed.
Pure chaos.
Exactly. You have cars speeding in from every direction. Your destiny is your car. You can steer, you can brake, you can accelerate.
But you have absolutely zero control over the hundreds of other drivers rushing through that same space.
None at all.
Yeah.
So if someone blows through the intersection and T-bones you, that is a collision of destinies. You couldn't control their car.
Right.
And by practicing what the text calls selfish forgiveness, you aren't fixing their car or pardoning their bad driving.
No.
You are just sweeping the glass out of your own intersection so you can keep driving safely.
That's a perfect analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely shifts how we process the aftermath of the crash.
How so?
Well, if we cannot control the collisions and we don't have the cosmic authority to forgive other people's bad driving, how do we stop the endless cycle of analyzing the crash?
So what does this all mean? Like, where do we go from here?
Here's where it gets really profound. The philosophy answers this by pointing out the only true jurisdiction we actually possess. If we can't forgive others, the final, most crucial point emphasized in the divine debt is that your absolute focus must be on forgiving yourself.
Forgiving yourself.
Yes. The author argues this is the only ledger you actually have access to.
How do we do that?
The text instructs you to analyze the act that was done to you with brutal, unflinching honesty. You have to audit the collision.
Okay, ask the hard questions.
Exactly. Did your behavior invite this response? Do you hold any actual fault in the sequence of events?
And if the answer is yes,
Then your duty is to own up to it, take responsibility for your part in the collision, and then forgive yourself.
but, and this is a big but, the author includes a massive warning label here regarding the trap of false blame, right?
Yes, very important. We have to be incredibly careful with how we audit ourselves.
Why is that?
The essay points out a profound psychological trap. Human beings have a natural, almost pathological tendency to blame themselves for things they had absolutely no control over.
Oh, totally. We do it to create order. If I blame myself for the car crash, it implies I had the power to prevent it. It's this illusion of control that makes a chaotic universe feel slightly less terrifying.
Precisely. And the text is very strict about dismantling this illusion. You must only forgive yourself for things you know to be empirically true.
Do not take on the guilt of another person's destiny just to feel in control.
Right. You cannot dictate the flux of everyone else's actions. The author demands that you stop blaming yourself for things outside your control, and equally, you must stop blaming others for circumstances clearly outside of theirs.
It's all about accurately placing responsibility.
Yes.
So when we step back and look at the entirety of this architecture, the sources present a really fascinating paradox.
They do.
On one hand, we are stripped of the grand godlike power to absolve others of their sins. We are explicitly told, put the keys down, it's not your door.
Right.
But on the other hand, we are handed an arguably much heavier, far more intricate burden.
A much harder job.
We are tasked with the rigorous discipline of neutralizing the anger in our own lives, navigating the collateral damage of colliding destinies, and ruthlessly auditing our own faults to find the grace to forgive the one person we are truly responsible for.
Which is ourselves. This changes the entire goal of moving on from trauma.
It really does.
True freedom isn't found in acting as a cosmic judge and granting absolution to those who hurt you. True freedom is neutralizing the power of the act.
Right.
It is recognizing that the world is chaotic, accepting your actual role in that chaos, and turning the lens entirely inward. Letting go is ultimately an act of reclaiming your own agency.
Reclaiming your own life.
Yeah.
It is the profound realization that those heavy keys you've been carrying were always meant for your own handcuffs.
Exactly.
You, listening right now, are the only one you have the power to set free.
That's the core truth of these sources.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder on your own, building off this radical framework. If you fully adopt this mindset, if you truly accept that you physically cannot forgive another person's sin, and that only God or the universe holds that ledger, does that make it easier for you to sleep at night? Does it bring you peace knowing that massive moral burden is finally off your shoulders? Or does it make the world feel a little more daunting, knowing that every unresolved wrong remains an open debt in the universe, completely out of your hands?
That is a tough question.
Something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.